Good evening and welcome. The 2019-2020 National Budget was announced in Parliament on Friday night, and tonight we hear from the Economy Minister, Mr. Aiyaz Khaiyum, for further discussion. Good evening, sir. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
The Prime Minister earlier this week characterized it as a lean and responsible budget, and in your budget address you referred to disciplined financial management in the backdrop of a global economic uncertainty. The budget deficit has also been brought down to $349.2 million. But is global uncertainty the only reason why expenditure restraint was a focus area in the budget?
No, I mean, thank you. Not the only reason, the sole reason. I mean, there's obviously, it is a contributing factor. But as we've announced, in the past number of years, that we are constantly looking at new ways of trying to ensure that there's restraining in the budget, that we actually work smarter with less. Of course, as far as the global economy is concerned, overall the global economy is going to actually dampen or slow down. There have been revised figures for various reasons. One of the most apparent one obviously is the trade war between China and USA. There's some political machinations in the Middle East. For example, if something happened in Iran, what would be the impact, for example, on fuel prices, oil prices? But what is really interesting is that if you look at overall, whilst the global economy is going to slow down, the slowing down is a lot more marked in the metropolitan powers, the metropolitan countries or developed countries as we call it. But in the emerging economies, your Vietnams, your Indias and your Chinas, the economies actually are growing. And in a couple of instances, there's been some predictions that China may be slowing down a bit, but nonetheless it will grow in excess of 6%. But there are other emerging economies. So it is because of the growth in the emerging economies that the dampening has been somewhat softened. Because if they had also slowed down, then the growth rate overall would be much more marked. So we have to understand which are the economies that are growing, and perhaps if you draw synergies with them, be able to draw relationships with them, be able to, for example, have a producer markets as their source markets, that it could actually work to your favor. In our case, of course, you have countries like Australia where we do a lot of trade, we get a lot of tourists from Australia, where there has been a revised downward trend in the growth for Australia. So how much of that will have an impact on our tourism arrival is something that we have to try and negotiate, we need to mitigate. So we need to have tactical marketing in Australia, of course, grow those areas. But also at the same time, it's a great opportunity, as we've been saying for the past number of years, to have new source markets. You should not always put all your eggs in one basket, as they say. In the same way, it has been our approach to the economic development, our contributors to the GDP. You should not only be dependent, for example, on only one or two sectors. So we need to grow other sectors. So, for example, you shouldn't only be dependent, hypothetically, just say on, sugar and tourism. Because if you, for example, have a very bad cyclone and it devastate all the hotels and all the sugarcane plantations come down, then you have a longer time it'll take you to recover from that particular incident. But if you have a number of other contributors to your GDP, whether it's ICT, whether it's in financial services, you can actually then mitigate your risks. So in the same way the tourism sector, we have now Fiji Airways that is taking delivery of 2 A350s in November and December. And now it means they can fly further. So you may be able to go to new source markets. And that, of course, then help us to get a bigger source of numbers into the country. So those things are what we need to understand. There has been, of course, we've had the global financial crisis back in 2008. And because of some smart policy measures and some restraining that we did put in place, we were able to get over that particular period, not necessarily have it hit us very hard. So this is a positive way we're looking at things, and obviously, because we've said we have a target to reduce our deficit overall, we gave this, the strategic framework for that a number of years ago, that we constantly want to reduce our debt to GDP ratio, but not more importantly, from a budget perspective, is our deficit as far as budgets are concerned. So, of course, we were interrupted by Winston. Winston, as you know, cost us nearly $1.3 billion of our GDP. In terms of direct construction that is required, actual money coming out of our pocket to rebuild is over $500 million. So, that kind of helped us to, well, not helped us, but actually stopped us from helping ourselves from reducing our deficit as a percentage of our budgets. So we were going down, and then of course with Winston we went up to 4.5, then we went to 3.5, and so this year we've kind of muted it all down. Some of the construction works have already been completed, so you no longer need those costs. You no longer need to go out and borrow additional money to rebuild the schools or health centers, etc. So this is why we are also able to reduce our overall expenditure.
Another area that was apparent in the budget was that it was a budget that was friendlier towards businesses. On Friday night during the budget announcement, among other things, there was a general consensus when we were speaking with Dr. Rohit Kishore, who characterized it as a business-friendly budget. Would you characterize it the same way?
Well, in fact, we like to think all our budgets are business-friendly. But I think the reason why people were saying that it was business-friendly because people thought because of the downturn in global economy and because of the need to tighten our belts, that we would somehow or the other go after the businesses, which we didn't. People thought we'd raise corporate taxes, yet politicians who don't know much about economics or financial management systems actually were predicting that. You had, unfortunately, the leader of opposition did something quite extraordinary, which is unheard of in Fiji, giving a budget-type address even before the budget is delivered, which is quite, I thought really out of place and rather unprofessional. But I mean, that being so, I think the reason why people say it's business-friendly is because they expected somehow or the other some type of assault on the business community, or that people thought they were predicting will raise VAT or corporate taxes, etc., or even ECAL, which we didn't. But we've been quite strategic about it. It is very important to understand and for people to understand and know that we do need the business community to have confidence. We've been saying this throughout. As the Honourable Prime Minister said it, and we've said a number of occasions through all the various budgets, we need to be consistent in our policy. We don't want to chop and change things from year in, year out. Because consistency actually instills a lot of confidence. And we've got a number of, couple of targeted initiatives for the private sector in terms of helping them to sort of grow, in particular invest in capital works. So, for example, for the hotel industry, we've got some attractive tax breaks for them. For building of new hotels, for old hotels they want to rebuild. We've got a time bar, sort of a period within the next 2 years they must renovate, and then they'll be able to get XYZ benefits. That of course instills confidence in the tourism sector. It builds up the product of the particular properties, the marketability of the products that they have, but also it leads to construction. Construction is always very good for the economy because it creates jobs and people go and buy material, it adds VAT to the economy, and it puts money into people's pockets. So we've done that. We've also, for example, have said about warehousing. If people get into, start up a business that specializes in warehousing, they can get various benefits. Or if you're an existing business that invests in warehouse for your goods, etc., there's various breaks in that too. So there's a number of initiatives that we put in place. We're also targeting the pharmaceutical industry. It's what we call a clean industry. We have Douglas Pharmaceuticals in Fiji, that's based in Nandi, it's the only pharmaceutical company. But we also want to encourage other pharmaceutical companies. Indeed, Douglas Pharmaceuticals has a much bigger operations in Auckland. This operation in Nandi, I think nearly 99% of all the workers are Fijians. In fact, they've taken some good workers of theirs, and pharmacists, etc., people who are dealing in science, to New Zealand to work there. So we'd rather the trend be reversed. We want them to come to Fiji.
We'll have more for you right after the break.
Welcome back. So we're talking about revenue, and one of the areas of revenue was ECAL. There was $174.1 million revenue that was collected from ECAL, 65% on infrastructure development, 19% on water management, 4% on agriculture development. And could you tell us more specifically what you have planned to do with this revenue?
Well, as the name suggests, it says ECAL is short form Environment Climate Adaptation Levy. So we can only expand these funds in those areas, specific areas. So the areas that you have, for example, read out, there are certain areas, for example, roads, coastal roads that get washed away because of encroaching waters, because of driven by climate change. So we use those fundings to, for example, build gambions, walls to protect the roads. Many of the roads are coastal roads. We use the funds, for example, to provide solar energy to rural areas. So there's a number of ways that the funds can be, of course, used. We've also said publicly that we'll be using a certain percentage of the funds that are raised from ECAL towards a new trust fund that will be the relocation trust fund. We have something like 43 villages that need to move to higher ground. It obviously costs a lot of money. It's not just simply about rebuilding an entire village, but it's the whole sort of holistic approach to that. We have a relocation guideline that has various sensitivities built into it, including gender-specific sensitivities, including for example, how we're going to deal with the youth, how we're going to deal with the agricultural products. Because if we have, for example, a community that's been living along this foreshore, for the past 300 years, and suddenly they have to go and live on a hilltop. They need to be able to adjust to that. What kind of source of livelihood will they now have? All that needs to be built in. So we need funding for this. And the reality is, as highlighted also previously and also in the budget address, that a lot of the climate-related funds are necessarily not always for adaptation per se. In fact, majority of the funds are for mitigation purposes. So adaptation is not necessarily as attractive to the private sector as is mitigation. So we need to be creative about this. So what we've said from the ECAL, a certain percentage of that will go towards this trust fund. And we may be able to attract other people, that can help us build, or have better funding for this relocation. There's some interesting things. For example, you will see there's an allocation for building seawalls to be able to protect certain coastal communities. But how you build those seawalls, you can actually build seawalls. We saw a design a few weeks ago where, you don't necessarily have to have a straight seawall. You may actually have it on an incline, or even if you do have a straight seawall or inclined seawall, you can build cavities in that so the crabs can come, you can grow trees out of that, plants, etc. So you can be quite creative, and you have what we call nature-based solutions. Mm-hmm. And that is one of the areas of focus that we have. So ECAL is used specifically for that. In respect of this budget here, as you know, for the 2019-2020 budget, we have now going to impose ECAL, which is already now being imposed on every motor vehicle that comes into Fiji, 10%. And we've also now put in ECAL on products that have a very high usage of energy. Mm-hmm. And also that may have a larger footprint of chlorofluorocarbons. So air conditioners, electric kettles, electric stoves. You have some people use electric lawnmowers, hair dryers, television sets, those types of things, and also some smartphones. So we kind of sort of trying to get people to understand and the reason for that particular levy. We also, as you know, that we have made an announcement about 2 years ago that we'll be banning single-use plastic bags, and that comes into effect on the 1st of Jan or next year, 2020. Mm-hmm. There'll still be other what we call, those thick ones, using sort of colloquial language, the thick plastic bags, the ones you buy in places like Jack's and Tapus, mm-hmm. etc. when you go out. Those can't be banned at this point in time, but the single-use ones, which is the one that we have a lot of problems with, because generally the thicker ones, people reuse it. Mm-hmm. They don't tend to throw that away. It's a single-use one that they tend to throw it away, and that's the one you see strewn across coastal lines and drains and waterways. Mm-hmm. But the levy for that is going up to 50 cents, mm-hmm. from 20 cents to 50 cents. We also made an announcement in respect of styrofoams, mm-hmm. That we're giving people now about an 18-month notice, mm-hmm. so that from the 1st of Jan 2021, we'll get rid of styrofoams. What is really interesting is after the budget, we had some people there, some business people, and one of them has said that they've already brought in machinery to, for example, make material made from cardboard for restaurants. Mm-hmm. Now, if you go to McDonald's, when you buy the chips, you see that they use a cardboard box. Right. That cardboard box is actually made offshore. So this particular gentleman from his business will now be making those cardboards in Fiji. So it obviously creates jobs. It also means we don't have to buy things from overseas. When you buy things from overseas, your foreign exchange actually diminishes or reduces. So there's a number of ways that we've seen that the private sector is now responding very positively to these changes that we are making. For example, the company that used to make plastic is now making what we call those woven bags that you'll see come into the shops from the 1st of Jan. We've given them protection so that the imported ones have a higher duty, so we can use the locally made ones. Mm-hmm. So ECAL actually is now bringing about a cultural change and the funding that we raise from that obviously goes into the specific programs.
Mhm. So you've also mentioned that you're putting in place long-term plans to ensure that Fiji carries on the agenda of climate change and championing those issues. You've said that you'll be incentivizing private businesses to adopt stretches of road and that you'd be giving them ad space. And also there's plans to give a tax concession to those who are the tax-free zone near Namboro for waste management. Talk to us about that.
Sure. I mean, it's a very important point. We had a meeting about a week and a half, a week before the budget. We met up with all the companies that either import beverages or make beverages in Fiji that is actually that you go and buy in those PET bottles, those plastic bottles, what you generally in Fiji call plastic bottles, you call PET bottles. Now, you can see that it's just being thrown everywhere. When FRA goes and cuts the grass along the highway, you can see all this rubbish being suddenly revealed to you. At the moment, there's no real incentive for people to, do anything with it. There is a company in Besari that is now collecting the PET bottles. They simply go and collect it, and then they're breaking it down now, but they can't do anything more with it apart from breaking it down. Coca-Cola, of course, they have a collection site, but you see, generally people get incentivized if there's something in it for them. Beer bottles, case in point. Till today, you have lorries driving around on a morning, yelling out bottle, 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 whatever, and people actually keep the beer bottles, so then they sell it, the long necks. Now, we want a similar situation. So countries like Australia, for example, have had this, what we call the container deposit scheme. So South Australia started first. So whenever you buy, for example, if you bought a bottle of beverage, whatever drink it would be, any fizzy drinks, then normally would be, say, 10, 15 cents on it, additional. So when you finish drinking that particular drink, you know that, okay, I will get 10 cents for this bottle. You'll have people going around collecting it, so I'll get 10 cents for this bottle. So that can incentivize people to not throw it away, willy-nilly. So we're going to start off with the scheme from next year. We're still working out the finer details of that. And we've got essentially everybody on board. Now, what happens when the bottles are collected? You need to do something with it. Generally, if you look at recycling these bottles, when I mean sort of melting it down, producing some more, or some other product. In some countries, for example, just sort of digressing a bit, old tires, they now use it for roads because it gives that flexibility to the tire and to the roads. And so they mix it in with the various products, the gravel, the stones, the aggregates with it together with the tar, and gives greater flexibility. So we need to be able to reuse some of these products. And also, say, for example, the PET bottles, you break it down, you wash it. Can we be able to have some recycling, further recycling of that done in Fiji? So, as you know, that Namboro landfill is the largest landfill in Fiji. The government has pumped in a number of millions of dollars into this particular landfill. So there's quite a lot of land available around it that is actually, the state has possessory rights over it. So we've said we'll make land available there specifically for any business that wants to get into recycling. So it's a great spot from that perspective. When the trucks come through, you can actually go through it, bring out all the things that you need for your recycling, and then of course whatever is left over can go into the landfill itself. Because at the moment, a lot of the material, a lot of the waste that probably can be recycled is simply being thrown in the landfill. Now, I mean, even products that people say, there's one water bottling company that says, this plastic bottle is recyclable or is what you call biodegradable. I mean, it can take over 1,000 years to biodegrade, or some of them 500 years. So what we want to do is create a specific area. We'll make the land available for them. They get depending on the level of investment, they get tax holidays. So we want that to be a specialized zone. And that's why we're putting that in place.
We'll have more for you right after the break. Welcome back. Mr. Khaiyum, in this year's budget address, one of the areas also looked at is streamlining or making more efficient existing policies and benefits. Some examples I can think of is bus fare assistance, parenthood assistance, and all of the new streamlined measures brought in with TELS assistance as well. Why was this a necessity?
Well, we've actually been, it's been an ongoing exercise. We've been assessing all the various government initiatives, whether it's, tax breaks for businesses, whether it's various social welfare programs. We've been monitoring it for quite some time. Obviously, the e-ticketing has helped us to get data a lot more easily because you know exactly how many people are getting on buses. You know exactly who's paying full fare, who's not paying full fare, who's using the subsidized, school fare, who's getting the social welfare. All of that is fantastic in respect of getting data. So we've seen a trend, and in many of the instances, we found, for example, some abuse taking place. We've seen, for example, people misusing the opportunity. So, before you used to have dedicated school buses. So, for example, you may have a bus that may leave the Nasino area that may come to, say, service schools in Suva, say along the Suva Sea Point area. You have a number of schools there, Cathedral, you have Suva Grammar School, and various other primary schools that are in that line. And they may then go on to say, schools like Maris or whatever the case may be. Now, a lot of the school students used to catch those buses, come to school, and then go back on those buses. We tried to be a lot more liberal. We said that, okay, because we had some representations made to us by students that sometimes they may study back late, or somebody may be on detention, or maybe somebody who's, for example, playing sports. So we opened it up. We said that you could catch any other bus and come to school, or after school you catch a bus, if just in case you're a bit late, you go back on that bus. But we've seen a lot of abuse of that. So students, for example, catching a normal bus in the morning, instead of going straight to Suva Grammar or whatever the case, not just Suva Grammar, I know a lot of schools in Nandi, Lotoka, whatever the case may be. Instead of going to the school straight, they'll come to, say, Suva City. They say, as they say in the local speak, they may say muck around a bit,
Yep.
and then they go to the school. And then after school, they'll come and muck around a little bit more in town. And then, because we extended the traveling times, up to 7 p.m., so some of them will just hang around town till about 10 to 7, then catch the last bus. So in that way, we're seeing a lot of abuse. So instead of using one bus, they're catching two buses. Sometimes, some instances, 3 buses. We're paying for that. Yeah, that's one. The other one we've seen is that a lot of the parents are now actually using their child's bus fare subsidized cards. So I don't have my phone here. You have those sort of phones, and then you have the phone inside your wallet. So what they'll do, they'll put the card inside, and simply walk in and tap onto the machine, and they pay half fare. And then they start arguing with the drivers, and I feel sorry for some of the bus drivers because they're trying to actually implement it, and so these people are abusing it. So there's that abuse. And we've seen some people, for example, who have the pensioners who get subsidized travel, or disabled people, their family members are using it. So you see, we need to curtail this. So what we've said is that as far as the school children bus fares are concerned and the concession rights, they have to now get on the school buses. And we've cut it down to 4:30 p.m. Unfortunately, in our bid to create a more liberal environment, a lot of the students are abusing it. So we have to wind it back until such time as people become a bit more mature, and of course we have the flexibility to go back to it. But at this point in time, we want to wind it back. The other one is, of course, the free milk. As you know, we have very noble intentions, good intentions to Class 1 students to get free milk. They were getting free Weet-Bix too, with it too. Government obviously was paying for the milk. We're now seeing that some teachers are taking it home. In some schools, we've had reports where kids are actually punching the stomp on the milk cartons to see whose milk goes the furthest instead of drinking it. So we've been assessing this for quite some time. So what we've done is we have said that now we're still making milk available, but it'll only be available now to maritime schools and also rural schools, deep rural schools. And then we'll see how that goes. So we still got an allocation for that. But again, it is because of the unfortunately because of the abuse. The other one that we've sort of tightened up areas too is we're seeing a lot of the students who go to university. So, for example, there may be a course available at the Nandi FNU campus, hypothetically, say in accounting. And the Suva campus in Zambul also offers accounting. What they'll do, they can do it there, and their home is in Nandi. Rather than doing it in Nandi, doing a course, they'll come to Suva. So they pick up the housing allowance, etc., etc. There's no real reason for them to come to Suva unless, because the only reason is because they maybe want to live in Suva city and, I don't know, maybe more nightclubs, I'm not sure. Or better nightclubs, I'm not sure about that. But the fact of the matter is, in that way, if we tighten it up, then we have, more funds available for more students to do better courses. We can give more scholarships for people to go overseas. But at this point in time, because there is that level of flexibility that we gave, people again are abusing it. So we're saying now, if you are from Nandi and the course is available at FNU in Nandi, you stay in Nandi and do the course in Nandi. It just makes a lot of sense.
We'll have more for you right after the break. In fact, when we come back, we'll discuss some new provisions or allocations for FNPF contribution. But all of that right after the break. Welcome back. Let's talk about the announced deduction for employers' contribution to FNPF, which is due to increase from 50% to 100% from 2020. What exactly does this mean?
Basically means, as you know, that your employer would be paying 10% contribution towards your FNPF account, and you contribute 8% from your salary. What it means now is that any contribution an employer makes on behalf of the employee, they can claim it as a tax deduction. So until recently, it was until the budget announcement, it was only 50% you could claim. So now you can claim the full 100%. And hopefully that of course gives, not hopefully, but it will give employers a break in that respect. So a particular expense, they can claim 100% of that because it is an expense for them. And secondly, we hope that it will make a lot more employers compliant with FNPF. So it's giving them assistance, making sure that they're compliant with it, and also giving them a particular relief in terms of their overall expenditures. Again, incentivizing them to invest more and invest more also in the staff.
Let's look at some of the reductions in customs duties. You've reduced the customs duty on bicycle and motorcycle tires, also on biodegradable kitchenware and tableware. It's gone down from 32% down to 0%, amongst others. Talk to us about that, please.
Well, bicycles obviously is good for health, it's good for the environment, so there's no carbon footprint. Again, motorcycles use less fossil fuel. We'd like to encourage more people, hopefully you can get more people into scooters. Very few scooters in Fiji. If you go to many cities in the world, a lot of people use scooters, and now you get very good, scooters in respect of the very lower carbon footprint levels. So we're encouraging that, and we'd like to have more, user-friendly environment on our roads and also footpaths for bicycles and scooters. Mm-hmm. The other one, of course, as you mentioned, that in respect of, because of the phasing out of plastic, so, paper straws, paper plates, anything imported, we've reduced the duty on that. We've also, for example, zero-rated duty on biodegradable cleaning detergents, washing powders, that are biodegradable, because that's obviously good for the environment, and we want that. There are certain cleaning agents or detergents, etc., that is not biodegradable. It's not very friendly to the environment, so we want to encourage more people to use that. One of the ways you can do that is by reducing the cost, which means reducing the tariff.
Let's look at another initiative that's been catching quite a lot of young eyes around the country. It's the digitization of government services. $39.1 million allocated to digital government transformation. Talk to us about that. There's plans to roll out some of the apps and the registration, rather, of newborns in the Western Division and in the Northern Division as well. There's also Biz Fiji portal that you had mentioned.
We're investing a lot of money, as you know, in the past year or so, and past 2 years, and also now more so in the next couple of years. Will be a really huge concerted effort in terms of leapfrogging our capacity in the digital space. The one that you did mention first up was about the registration of babies using apps. The Honourable Prime Minister launched that in Suva a couple of weeks ago, where now what it essentially means is, for example, if a mother gives birth today, what used to happen, So I should say what used to happen is that you get a birth ID card that's issued by or number that's issued by the Ministry of Health, the hospital. Then you use that to then go to the BDM office, physically go there and say, I want to register my baby. My baby was born on XY date. This is the evidence from the hospital. And now I want to name my baby Joshua or Josephine, whatever the case may be. And, mother's name, father's name, fill all that out. And then you sit there and you wait for it. Now what the Honorable PM launched was the app. So you could be given birth this morning, you're recovering today or tomorrow, the mother or father are there. They can actually go onto the app, fill out all the details. They may have decided on the baby's name by now. Put that in and then say, I want to come and collect the birth certificate next week, Monday at 10:30 a.m. So you come to the BDM office here and they'll have the birth certificate ready. You simply pay, you collect it and you go. Now, that requires the hospital system and the BDM system to be able to talk to each other. Otherwise, of course, there could be gaps. Now, as announced next week, the Honourable Prime Minister on Thursday is launching this particular application for Singatoka, Nandi, Lautoka and Ba. And as announced in the budget, a few weeks after that, we'll be connecting Vanwalevu and Lambasa, etc., and Tavuni. Then we come back to Nasori and all those other places. So the entire country, eventually, will be covered with this app. Going ahead into the system, you can have then payment gateways, which we're also launching. So you actually don't even have to pay the money. You pay it through your phone, through either your debit card or the Visa debit card or your credit card, or also through M-Pesa. What we are saying is that when you do that for the next 1 year, we'll pay any fees that's applicable. As you know, normally banks charge a fee for that. We'll pick up that fee for you. So there's no fee for you. So what we've seen actually since the PM actually launched this, we've seen a much higher uptake of this particular app. More people are registering babies a lot quicker. Unfortunately, we've had a culture where a lot of parents, you wouldn't believe this, don't register the babies until they turn about 6 when they're about to go to school. Then there's a huge mad rush, in the months of January. Now, if we are able to get more registrations, 100% registration at birth or soon after birth, it gives us better data too. So we can plan, we know, okay, in the Suvarnasori corridor, there's this many babies. So if there's, for example, there may be a lot of babies in the Makoi area. So in terms of your health services, the kind of doctors you roll out, you may have more pediatricians going into those areas. It gives you much better ability to plan your government services. That's the beauty about data, capturing the data. So we're doing that. As also announced, for example, the Companies Office by the 14th of June, you will be able to conduct 24/7 online company and business name searches, lodge reservations for companies and business names, lodge new name registration, and also pay for services online. Then by the 30th of September, companies' businesses will actually be able to lodge online application to make basic changes to the businesses. Then by December, January, you can actually register new companies online altogether. So a number of these apps are being being rolled out. We have then Biz Fiji that actually will help create a particular hub where you get all the information in respect of applications. You don't have to, at the moment, people have to run to different ministries, physically go to different offices to register businesses, start businesses, get various approvals. All of this can be done online.
We'll come back with the final segment right after this. Let's now take the discussion towards revenue collection. And for every budget, there's projected revenue, which does not always realize. Efficient revenue collection and monitoring has been a priority for both the government and FRCS. In what ways does the budget cater for more streamlining in revenue collection?
I think there's a couple of aspects to revenue collection. One of the things that we've been always saying that the Fiji Revenue Customs Services needs to see all taxpayers as their customers, as their clients, as opposed to sort of looking down upon them, as opposed to always trying to, be very heavy-handed with them. Because, if you give that level of respect, if you give that level of, or have that level of understanding that these people actually contribute towards your budget, contribute towards you meeting your targets, then I think you'll have a much better relationship. There needs to be a symbiotic relationship between the tax collector and the taxpayer. And so that's a cultural change we've been trying to drive through. We've spoken to their board a couple of times about it. And as announced in the budget, we're putting together a very high-powered, if you like, cross-section of business houses, professionals, to look at the business processes of FRCS. Because we think there's enormous room for the business process changes, for streamlining processes, but I think also the attitude. You may have sometimes the CEO and his upper echelons of his team, fairly good, but it's the people who are at the day-to-day level who are interacting with businesses and business houses and taxpayers, how they deal with them. And I think that culture needs to change. Notwithstanding that, the FRCS has over the years also closed a number of loopholes, and that has increased our tax revenue, because the reality is there was a lot of leakage, a lot of seepage from our tax collection capacity and ability. We have a very basic philosophy. We now have one of the lowest tax rates in this part of the world, even lower than Australia and New Zealand. Corporate tax rate is only 20%. We have, for example, personal income tax that is 20%, unless you earn more than $270,000, and you pay the social responsibility tax and also the ECAL. But even that over the years has been sort of brought down in alignment. Now, the fact of the matter is that anybody who earns less than $30,000 does not pay any tax. Despite all of that, our tax collection has actually gone up, which shows two things. One is that we've obviously have managed to close some of the loopholes. We still think there's a lot of loopholes that needs to be closed up also. Secondly is that you get greater compliance with the lower tax rate. One of the, of course, key initiatives will be the VMS system, the VAT monitoring system. Now, VAT monitoring system, those applications, those machines will be now put really everywhere in time to come. But it's not just about VAT monitoring, it also looks at the sales. I mean, if you go to a lot of the shops in downtown in Suva, they won't give you a receipt. In fact, our economic intelligence team from the Ministry of Economy, just a week or two before the budget, went to a very well-known chicken outlet, downtown Suva, and when they got the receipt when they bought something, the date on that was 2018. So how do you think, when they put in their tax returns as a business, are they showing their revenue from 2019?
Right.
So next time, just go to one of the shops here and see if they actually give you a receipt or not. See whether they have the VAT set out or not. So what we're saying, there's a lot of low-hanging fruits that we can address. We want businesses to make money. They have to make money so they stay in the game. They need to have their margins, but more so we need to increase the volume of sales. But you simply pay a tax. The tax rates are very low. You simply pay that, you get along fine. Profit is not a bad word if it's not oppressive. Profit is not a bad word if you are paying your taxes. And that's what we want, because if everybody contributes, we have better roads, better schools, better education, health systems, etc. So that's how we intend to sort of address the issue of revenue. It's been a very conservative assessment of revenue that we put in place. So we expect, if anything, for revenue collection to be higher than what we are projecting.
So rounding off the discussion on the budget today, talk to us about the generality of this budget. How does it fit into the long-term national development plan that you've spoken about before? And how does it help to achieve Fiji's long-term development objectives?
Well, in short, very well. But if you see in the budget announcement, we spend a lot of time focusing on our youth, on our young people. 50% of the population is below the age of 27. Over 70% or close to 70% are below the age of 40. We spend a lot of time in the budget just talking to the young people. We have a lot of confidence in them. We also need to provide opportunities for them. One of the ways you provide opportunities for them is to be able to leverage on some of the, what we may call the natural uptake or natural skills in specific areas, predominantly technology. I mean, if you give a phone to a small child, their ability to navigate through that, through the smartphone, is, 1,000 times a lot quicker than a person who may be 50 or 60 years old. Right. Recently, when I was returning from the World Bank meeting, in California, I spent a day. Things like coding is the next best thing. So we are having a huge focus, in terms of literacy and numeracy skill sets. We need to go to the basics, fix up the early childhood education, get the primary system right. And also, by investing in that, we are planning ourselves better for the future, positioning ourselves better for the future. Similarly, you'll see, for example, the youth-focused initiatives we've announced about having a National Youth Awards, incentivizing people. The YES program is continuing. The digital uptake, this is creating a lot of jobs. I mean, even with the work we're doing with Singaporeans, we now have people coming from the various universities getting work placements, because eventually the Singaporeans will leave. And we need people to run those systems for us. There's new job market created there. So while on one hand you may have less queues and requirement of less cashiers, but at the same time we're creating more jobs in the ITC sector. So in terms of the future, it fits in well. In terms of, you see the public-private partnership we've got with the hospital, with Lotoka and Ba, we've got budgetary allocation for that. It opens up enormous opportunities in the healthcare sector, but also the ancillary services linked to that, whether it's aged care, retirement villages. So again, we're diversifying our economy into the services sector. We are naturally very good with children, naturally very good with elderly people. Let's take advantage of that. Let's turn that into an economic opportunity for us in infrastructure development. So the whole gambit of areas that we've addressed, including still our continuation in infrastructure, opening up different parts of Fiji for more productive capacity.
Thank you very much for joining us on the show, sir, and we wish you all the best in the next fiscal year.
Thank you.
And that's all we have for you tonight. For more news and stories related to the national budget, you can visit the FBC News website and stay tuned to our 6 radio stations. Until next Sunday, good evening.